In this video, we're going to look at how we handle errors when we're using promises as consumers. In the previous lecture, we learned that with the then method, we can register a callback inside the promise, and when the promise resolves successfully, it triggers that callback and gives us the result. Handling errors works in a very similar way. Instead of using then, we use the catch method. The catch method is essentially the mirror image of then. It stores callbacks for error cases instead of success cases. These error callbacks receive the error that the promise encountered. Let's look at our example from the previous video. I've now added a throw delayed error function which produces a promise. This promise becomes rejected after 3 seconds, and the rejection message is whoops. If we register a callback using the then method, it will only be invoked after successful completion. But since this promise fails, this callback will never be called. In fact, as we learned, as soon as the promise becomes rejected, the callback is disposed. So instead, we register a different callback using catch. We also print out the reason passed as parameter to this callback. Now we can see the response to the error. So there's perfect symmetry here. If we attach catch callbacks when the promise is still pending, those callbacks will be stored and triggered if an error occurs. If the promise has already resolved successfully, then the catch is simply ignored. And if the promise has already failed by the time we attach the catch callback, then the callback will run immediately. In short, everything we said about the then method also applies to the catch method, just in reverse. There's also a third method called finally. The finally method also takes callbacks and keeps them in a separate list. These callbacks will run whether the promise succeeds or fails. Since these callbacks run in any situation, they don't receive any parameters. They're mainly used for cleanup tasks that don't depend on the result. Let's go back to our example. Now we can attach a finally callback. We can see that it runs in both cases, both when we use the successful promise or when we use the rejected one. Just like with the then callback and catch callback, you can attach multiple callbacks to finally, and they'll be stored in a separate list. Of course, if you call the finally callback after the promise has already been resolved or rejected, the callback is immediately scheduled for execution. So this concludes our introduction to how to handle promises using callbacks. But if you recall, as we said at the beginning of this video series, the purpose of promises is to actually save us from the callback hell. And in fact, usually we prefer not to handle promises using callbacks. So in the next lecture, we'll see an amazing trick that was added to the JavaScript language that allows us to respond to promises without using callbacks. See you then.